can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Michael Cirillo of FlexDealer. You can check him out at FlexDealer.com. Michael, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out some other episodes people should check out of the podcast. This is part of the Top Agency series. I did one with Todd Taskey. He's got the Second Bite podcast. Todd helps pair agencies with private equity. He helps sell agencies second bite because sometimes he's found that they sell more on the second bite than they do on the first. We talked about the agency space, what's going on with valuations and selling and M&A. Is a really interesting episode. Another one was good was Adee Clevitt. Adee Clevitt specializes in creating SOPs for companies. So she's like an easy button for SOPs. So we geeked out on our favorite productivity software, operating procedures, Michael, all the sexy stuff that makes the business work. So it was a fun episode sharing our different resources that we like. Kevin Hergen was another good one. He's at an agency since 1995. So he just shared the evolution of, business. We were talking, Michael, before you hit record about some of the ups and downs, the economy, like all the crazy stuff. And he's kind of been through a bunch of the roller coaster rides there. So it's interesting to hear his take over the years. So check those out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So, Michael, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, but run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And Michael has a podcast. He's been doing it for right now, almost 600 episodes. So you can check it out, the Dealer Playbook. He's got some really interesting episodes. So Michael knows how important podcasting is as well. So I'm excited to introduce Michael Cirillo. He's CEO of FlexDealer, Ariel Lift Kit, and he's the host of the Dealer Playbook podcast. FlexDealer helps retail auto dealers turn traffic into revenue. They help with the strategies, the tech, and they map out so people can make it easy for car shoppers to buy over and over again. So they do. He's been doing it for almost 2 decades now, so it's pretty amazing. And Michael's going to share his journey. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much. And by the way, you said you've been podcasting for 15 years, and it shows, dude. That was the best intro and just smooth into the sponsor read that I've ever heard. You do it better than some of the big dogs out there.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And all of them.
That means a lot coming from you. You can go back and check out some of his. Gary V had Gary V on the podcast. He looks like 12. That's how long ago Michael did Gary V and Grant Cardone and a bunch of others. So I appreciate that. Let's start off and talk about FlexDealer. I mean, we have some amazing things to talk about. I don't know how we're going to cover it all in like the next 40 minutes, because from, gratitude is a big thing that comes up for you and his journey as a business owner, but also, you just shared with me that you were suicidal and depressed, and it's crazy to think back to what you were in your 20s to now, I'm sure, for yourself. So we're gonna cover some of these things and what you went through. But let's start off with FlexDealer and what you do.
Yeah. FlexDealer's on a mission as a marketing agency that's specific to the niche of retail auto dealers to bring them the most realistic view of what it actually takes to grow their business digitally. So where most agencies in our industry deliver a very cookie cutter approach, hey, we're going to come in and do SEO this way. We're going to come in and run your ads this way. We're going to do this, that, and the next thing. And there's very little collaboration with the dealership. We come in and say, hey, well, let's flip that on its head. Every dealer, every market, every brand is unique. Just because you own a Chevy franchise or a Honda franchise doesn't mean you're the same as every Honda dealer. Part of that is powered by the desire to help the market understand that the few bad apples that give the stigma to car sales and car sales people and dealerships, that's very few. It's like anything. The few kind of bad experiences, the radicals, the whatever, they're the ones that kind of shape the stigma for the entire industry. We're on a mission to help our dealer partners overcome that negative stigma that's associated with the car business by showing them how they can market themselves, brand themselves, put their message out there, what their values are in a way that resonates with the demands of the market. And then just, deliver them cutting edge tech and marketing strategy and practical ideas that they can deploy over their morning cup of coffee that are going to help them see sustainable gains. And what we notice from that is, instead of flip-flopping from agency to agency, like is very common in our space, that our dealer partners tend to stick around for quite some time. We have dealer partners that have been with us for 20 plus years. Many, by many, I mean over a dozen, that have been with us for over 15 years, and then even more over 10 years, and so on and so forth, which we think is pretty spectacular considering that we're a month-to-month agency. We don't have long-term contracts, which, people that are in the M&A space probably don't want to hear that part. But it's a testament to us that because our behavior maps to our desire, and our desire is felt by the client partner, we stick around for a long time, regardless of month to month.
We have a lot to cover. I want to talk about the evolution of the services, evolution of hiring too, but let's stick on that topic for a second, which is, I know you don't follow what the crowd is doing.
Right.
So let's talk about the month to month and the thought and decision of why, even though maybe other people are advising you, you should really have a 6 month, a year, whatever. What made you decide to do that?
It didn't happen all at once. I mean, we've tried termed agreements in the past. For me, there's a KPI, there's a metric that is more important to me in business than probably any of the others. And I know some people might be thinking, shouldn't money in be a good metric? It is definitely, but I believe it's the byproduct of what I'm about to share, which is relationships of trust. And further to that, long-term relationships of trust. And so when I really look at my desire to have a long-term relationship of trust, to help somebody else be successful, knowing that I'll be successful with them, right? We know the late Zig Ziglar quote, help as many other people achieve success and you'll be successful. That really resonates with me. And so when I looked at it and said, hey, long-term relationships of trust are the most important metric for our business, I then began to examine, well, so let me get this straight then. If long-term relationships of trust is the metric, and my first behavior is to put handcuffs on them and say, you can't go anywhere else, it just seemed very counterproductive, counterintuitive to me. And so we just simply said, hey, we want to make sure that we're accountable. The greatest accountability mechanism for us as your partner is to make sure that our behavior invites long-term relationships, that we don't need some clause in a contract to force the long-term relationship, but it's going to be our behavior, how we treat you, how we execute, how we're in the trenches with you. Then the thesis is maybe they'll stick around for a lot longer. And that's just proven to be the case. In fact, some of our client partners, unsolicited from us, came to us and just said, hey, we know we're going to stick with you. Can we just pay for the whole year up front? And the first time that happened, we were like, what? Okay, you can do that? It was one of those type of things. And that's been a long-term relationship that's been well over a decade now that client partner in particular has been paying for the entire year up front. even though there's no term in their contract. And so, to me, that's the most important thing. Don't go against what you say you're going to do. Don't go against what you think or say is important. And for us, if we want a long-term relationship of trust with you, then the last thing on our mind is how do we lock you in and remove your agency, remove your choice from the mix.
What was their motivation, Michael, for that? Was there, I don't know if it was like a tax thing at the end of the year, or was it, do they get a certain, some people offer, okay, if you pay for a year, we'll give you a percentage off or something like that.
Sure.
What were some of the motivations there that maybe other people
some of
could
it has
use?
to do with tax implications on their end. For us, as we were going through the process and exploring the first time, we definitely said, hey, we're gonna give them an incentive, right? So we do, I think, 20% off if they pay for the year up front. And it wasn't for us to incentivize them per se, because they had already offered to do it. It was more for us to just say, hey, here's a little token of our appreciation for that. And so that's now just become something that we do every year. And I don't want to make any mistake about this. That account also grows. So every 2 years, they know that there's going to be an upcharge. We're going to grow, whether it's due to cost of living, whether it's due to cost of goods, whether it's, whatever it might be, inflation. But with that, we're also wanting to over deliver and incentivize. So for example, this last time that they upsold, it was at that second year interval. Not only did we give them the 20% discount for paying up front, we also said, hey, we're also going to develop a new website for your group where all of the stores in your group can have their inventory in one single place. And it's going to make a streamlined shopping experience, so on and so forth. And so we're always looking for what can we do extra to sweeten the pot, put that chef's kiss on it, so to speak.
And then is that, I'm curious, because this conversation comes up a lot about navigating increasing fees. And how do you handle that? Is that upfront that you tell a company, like, and then even if you tell them upfront, they may forget in like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you navigate that in upfront? And then also when the 2-year mark hits and you're like, remember we told you this?
It's not so much a remember I told you. It's more so like we talked about this, but here's what we're going to do. So I think it's important for businesses to stand in their authority. Often, and I've experienced this before, it's very easy, especially in the agency game, to become order takers. And you just sit there and you're like, oh man, the customer said that if we don't do this, then they're going to look somewhere else, or like whatever it might be. For me, I think the narrative is a little bit different. I recognized early on that being a family business in the sticks of British Columbia, Canada, and not having a face and just being another run-of-the-mill mom and pop shop wasn't going to work for us. I really invested in personal branding. No, I did not buy some big course and figure it all out that way. It was just organic. It started with a desire of, I got to put myself out there. There needs to be a face to this business if we ever want to break out of this region. And so it was just videos. It was educational content. It was all the things you see everybody doing now, just 15 years ago. Really, as those things started to break out. The podcast, I started the podcast 10 years ago. The desire was it's a no pitch, give them practical tips, have good conversations type of podcast. And it hit. I mean, it hit real quick right out of the gates. So the reason I share that as a bit of a preface is if you don't have a personal brand and you're not known as an authority on a topic, it's very difficult for you to break out of that order taker mode. However, it's really hard for my client partners to dispute the fact that I've written 2 best-selling books and I speak as a keynote speaker on stages across the globe, from Australia to Germany and everywhere in between. It's hard for them to dispute that they see my podcast every week, that I've had guests like Gary Vee and Chris Voss and, all of the names that they tend to follow. It's hard for them to dispute those things. And so if it's ever called into question the authority that I have based on what I've built, I can refer them to third-party reasons. Oh, hey, well, let's see what Rand Fishkin says about SEO. The founder of Moz. Even Zoom agrees with me here. It's giving me a thumbs up.
Right.
Let's talk to Marcus Sheridan, the best-selling author of, They Ask You Answer. Let's talk. All of my buddies, and so the authority definitely lends its hand to when we are going to position for more money. The upfront as well, very, very important. In fact, when we sign new dealers up, we let them know what our process is. And at the exact point, we will ask them for more money. So if I'm doing a sales pitch, which I don't really feel like I sell, I know it's sales, but it's more of a consultative approach based on everything I just shared. When I come into a sales call, it's typically like the doctor specialist with the clipboard. That's what they expect from me. So I'm like, okay, tell me what's going on. And they bare their souls to me now. It wasn't always that way, but it is now. I simply let them know, hey, here's how our process works and why it's different. Phase 1 is this. Phase 2 is this. Once we've concluded phase 2, we're going to know exactly how much it costs to generate a high quality opportunity for your business. And at that point, once we know, should you want more, we will ask you for more money. This $4,000 a month deal will become a $6,000 a month deal at that point. Fair? And they go, yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay, well, then along the way, Jeremy, what we do is we make sure that there is regular interaction. In fact, any of our retainer clients, marketing retainer clients, meet with their account rep every single week. And I'll give you the formula for those calls. It's very simple. They get on the call. They exchange their pleasantries. They review the work that happened the previous week as an accountability. Hey, here's what we accomplished based on last week's meeting. Here's then the opportunities we see that we should capitalize on. Let's talk about what you have on the go. Let's create the priority list together. And that's what we're going to be tackling over the next week. Is that what you want? Is this clear? Does it map? Yes, it does. Fantastic. Off we go. We also make ourselves available via text message. So any of our client partners can text anybody in the business, including me. In fact, just before we hopped on, I had a client partner that said, hey, man, I'd really love if you hopped on this call. We're vetting a new software to do X, Y, and Z. Your opinion would matter. Would you be okay with that? And I'm like, I shoot back. Yeah, absolutely. Communication, key. And we repeat that every week. And then at the end of the month, really the beginning of the next month, because the end of the month for car dealers is pretty hairy. They're trying to close their books out for the month and get the last sales going and all those sorts of things. So the first week of the following month, we do a whole month review and we say, okay, here's what happened in the month. Here's how things performed. Here's the recommendations we have. What's going on your end? What's coming for this month? What do we need to be aware of? So on and so forth. We make it so clear and simple that they know, hey, just so you know, we are about to conclude phase 1. We now know how much it costs to generate a high quality interaction from your Google ads, from your Facebook ads. We're running some advertising on Hulu. Here's how it's performed. Your traditional marketing, let's look at that. We know how it performed. Here's what it costs you. Now we're moving into phase 2. Phase 2 is to continue on with this, and this. We spell it out. At the end of phase 2, you're going from $4,000 to $6,000 a month. So they know it's They know. The biggest challenge I think businesses face, and I know because I've been there, is lack of communication, lack of the right type of communication. Telling your customers what you're going to do because that's your safe space. That's your comfort zone. instead of just pausing and adapting. My whole business would not exist if we didn't listen to our customers. The only reason, by the way, we're an agency is because we started as a website company. We built our own proprietary CMS. You know, it's not built on any other platform. It's not WordPress. It's not. We built our own content management system to build car dealer websites. We built our own inventory management system for dealers. The reason we're an agency is because one day a customer called and said, "Hey man, my website doesn't show up." And I'm like, "What the heck does that mean? My website doesn't show up?" This is going back to 06, 2005, 2006. I'm like, "What the heck does that even mean?" Go and Google. Oh, there's this thing called SEO. Oh man, I got to learn everything. There's only 3 people in the business at this point, and I'm like, I better learn everything there is to know about SEO. Learn, apply, learn, apply, learn, apply. Oh, dang, it's working. We should sell this as a service. And it just compounded from there.
Why car dealers?
That's a great question. So, stemming from a family business, my dad used to publish telephone books. Anybody remember what those are? The telephone books they're those things you're using to prop up your computer monitors right now. So he published phone books from 1982 to 1995. He saw the writing on the wall in about 95. I remember he called our entire family, me and my siblings, into his home office. He said, "Watch this." And we were all standing around his desk. We're looking at his computer monitor, and he connects to the internet. Ping pong, that whole thing. We're sitting there. We're like, what's this all about? And he brings us to one of the 5 websites that existed back then. It was the Encyclopedia Britannica website. And we're sitting there watching. Their home screen was a picture of the statue of David, but because the internet was so slow, I've never waited so long to get a penis to load on a screen, like that's what it was like, right? Statue of David. Sorry, Mom. And my dad looked at us. I'll never forget. And he looked at us and he said, "This is going to kill the encyclopedia salesperson." Because up to that point, they were going door to door. Every year, new volume would come out. They'd come to your door. They'd try and sell you the whole lot for $18 zillion. Now we've got the whole encyclopedia right at our fingertips. And he said, "This is going to kill the encyclopedia salesperson." And he saw the writing on the wall. He's like, "Wait, what other jobs will this alter or displace?" Vacuum salespeople, the Watkins snake oil salespeople coming door to door. And phone books. So we had franchises of our phone book directory across Canada. We had sold franchises of it. And he took a couple years off after the sale of that. He was in Washington State on a motorcycle trip, and he stopped in at a gas station. And there he saw this magazine that you could purchase for $1. And it was just a classifieds car dealer magazine. Every page was just 9 pictures of a vehicle and the dealer's logo and phone number, that sort of thing. And he went, "Man, there's no competition to Auto Trader in Canada. Like nobody is doing this in Canada." So he came back and he toyed with it and he said, "Hey, you're going to learn how to sell." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You're going to drive 2 hours in that direction and you're going to stop at every dealership on the way back home and you're going to sell this magazine idea. And I'm going to go 2 hours in that direction and I'm going to stop at every dealership on the way home and we're going to meet back home and we're going to talk about what we did." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm 17. I don't know how to sell." He's like, "You do today, because if you don't, then our family starves." Right? Sort of a thing. Putting on the white shirt, the tie, the suit. 17-year-old Michael sitting outside completely intimidated by these general managers who, by the way, always are named Dave for some reason. And at the time they were all 65 and I'm 17 and I'm like, "Oh," and I would go in and do the sales pitch with I don't know what else to call it. It's the nervous swallow, mid word swallow where you're like, "Hello, sir. My name is Michael Cirillo." And that sort of a thing. I hated every minute of that. Every minute I hated of it. We didn't have a mock-up. Jeremy, we didn't have anything to show them. I was sitting in dealers' offices going, It's going to be about this big, and it's going to be glossy, and the graphics are going to pop off the page and all of this. What I didn't realize now, and I don't even know if my dad realized then what he was doing, was teaching me how to sell, was teaching me how to build from absolutely nothing. We had no bank loans, no lines of credit, no investors. It was whatever you sell today goes in the checking account so we can buy groceries. And I know some people might be thinking, oh, but you just said he sold the whole he franchised his company and he sold all of it. It wasn't that handsome of a deal. Like, let's just be clear about that. It wasn't that handsome of a deal. Who's buying phone books when they all know phone books are going to die? And that's what we did. So why automotive? My dad saw the opening. We published an automotive magazine for all the way up to this was 97 we started, all the way up to 2012. And somewhere around 2004, 2005 is when we started getting into digital. And so I would legit be designing advertising for the magazine on week 1. I would be building websites on week 2, going back into production week 3 on the magazine, going back to building websites week 4. And we did that forever and ever and ever until 2012. I basically said to my dad, hey, I need to kill your entire business because we can't, like, no. Everybody's talking about websites and that I got to kill. And he goes, cool, replace the revenue. And that was the very loose way that Flex was born. It was born from, oh, okay, my dad had a moment where he saw the writing on the wall for phone books. I had my moment where I saw the writing on the wall for car magazines. And was it really us being all like Gary V intuitive? No, it was just simply us listening to our customers. I'm not going to glamorize it and sugarcoat it. Our customers are saying, hey, what about websites? What about websites? What about websites? And when you hear that question enough, you hopefully at some point go, right, what about websites? Right. And so it's been an evolution ever since that point all the way to today.
What did you learn from your dad and your experience about sales that you now use with FlexDealer?
Yeah, there are all sorts of lessons I learned from sales. And I'll say this about my dad too. I'm sure it was intentional for him, but when you get in the car to get a ride to school and the only thing you hear is Brian Tracy cassettes and
what else did he listen to? Yeah, I had all those, by the way, audio cassettes. If someone's of a certain age, or these things that you put in to the car, but I had the Zig Ziglar ones, the Brian Tracy ones, the Tony Robbins ones, the Jack Canfield. Yeah, so
yes,
it sounds like he is of the same nature, and you through osmosis would listen to that stuff. What were some of your favorites?
You don't realize you do absorb it. I'll never forget one thing Brian Tracy said. And I didn't realize this was indoctrinated into my subconscious until I was maybe 35. And it came out, and I heard it one time when I was 35, and it brought me right back to the wood paneled station wagon, listening to it for the first time. Brian Tracy said, if you want the things in your life to change, you need to change the things in your life. And I was like, as a 35-year-old, that was the light bulb. I was like, what? I remember hearing that. So was it intentional? I'm sure it was intentional for my dad to be like, no, I'm gonna let my kids listen to this stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing is he taught me the importance of urgency. Most people aren't urgent enough in sales. There are people listening right now that are like, what do I do? What am I doing wrong? How come I'm not closing new deals? How come that deal rotted on the vine? Time kills deals. You're not feeling urgent enough because maybe you're not wanting to break out of your comfort zone. What my dad taught me indirectly is that you must become comfortable being uncomfortable. Fast forward to today, sales is so second nature. You heard me say earlier, I don't feel like I'm selling anymore. I'm consulting. It's very natural. But for the onlooker, they would probably see me doing sales, right? I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling people. I'm texting constantly. I'm asking for the next appointment. I'm asking them I'm very direct. Well, those are all things I think my dad taught me, not by sitting me down in a classroom like fashion, but by demonstrating. And for me, that's a huge lesson, not just in sales, but how I choose to parent my children. I can talk at my kids till I'm blue in the face. What I really ought to do, and by the way, I'm not perfect at it, but I try, is to demonstrate for them. Don't talk at me, demonstrate for me. So, and I think that's what my dad did. There were a lot of sales meetings where I was sitting next to him and I would mimic his seating, how he would sit. And he taught me never sit like this. So if you're going to do that, you always put your, like it was just little things. And I realize now as a 41, almost 42-year-old man, how many of those things have just become a natural part of how I approach what I do. Urgency, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And contrary to popular belief, you don't need anything to get started. You don't need bank loans. You don't need a business plan. You don't need any of these things. What you need is your feet held to the fire, because if you don't sell something today, we die. And I'm so grateful for it. Hated it back then, but I'm grateful for it now.
Yeah. Going back to, so it's, I mean, for me, I think selling is a mindset too, because the way you talk about it, and that's the way I think about it too, which is trying to help someone and very consultative. And if our solution is not right for them, then we point them in another direction. And if someone's going in, I could see, I've talked to people, their mindset is selling instead of helping. Right. And so I think that's what I kind of gather from what you're saying is like, you don't go in with that mindset of selling. It's really just helping, consultative, trying to help them figure out what the solution is. And if you're the solution, great. If not, that's fine too. And backing up to what you were saying about the navigating the increased fees, you talked about authority, differentiation, and then value, and all those three things kind of add up to that conversation being easier and almost seamless because you've kind of set it up from the beginning. Yeah. So I could see car dealers, Michael, now, but I want to go back a little bit because in your teens and 20s, what did you actually think you'd be doing? Obviously, you're like, I'm going to be an agency owner someday, but what did you actually think you were going to be doing? And we could talk a little bit about, it sounded like some hard times.
Yeah.
During that time.
As a teenager, this is going to sound weird. I knew I was going to be a businessman somehow. Back then, I thought I would own a radio station that played all alternative rock music all the time. We're talking like Foo Fighters, Bush X, like, stuff like that. It was going to be called 1500 The Pit, and I was like, man, I fantasized about owning this radio station. I fantasized about owning this radio station with my best friend, Dan. And we were not your typical teenage boys. We were in the sense that, yeah, we played video games. We played guitars. We were in a band. But I remember going to, Sunday school and, youth activities. And Dan and I would find a corner and we would pull out a piece of paper and we would draw diagrams for like architectural diagrams of what our office one day would look like. We would take selfies before selfies were cool on the like Kodak, disposable. We would take selfies and we'd be in our suits and we're like, this is the cover of this magazine. We're going to be featured on this cover of this magazine. Like we were putting out into the universe that we would be.
Is Dan
partners.
your CTO currently?
Dan
is it the same
CTO.
Dan?
He is my business partner.
Okay.
Today.
Wow.
So like we were calling it forward all those years. We didn't know that's what we were doing. Some people call it the law of attraction. Some people, we were definitely putting the vibes out there, and we went our separate ways. He went to university and I went to university, and we did separate things. And I, continued building the family business, and things just flowed together. Where today, he's a partner in our larger business, Eastbound Enterprises, which holds FlexDealer and LiftKit and Aria. But yeah, he's actively operating as our CTO today.
So talk about some of the hard times in your 20s that you hit.
In my early 20s, I went and did missionary work in the Philippines, which was a tremendous experience. But when I got home from that, I became depressed and didn't know I was depressed because I'd never been depressed before. I just thought I was just becoming a grumpy person, hated the world, hated people, hated myself. Didn't know what that was, held on to it for a long time, didn't talk to anybody about it until I realized at one point that I'm looking at the ceiling fan in my bedroom in the morning thinking, oh, okay, that seems reasonable. Like, let's go look for some rope kind of a thing. And I don't want to sensationalize that side of things too much. There's other people that are way better at doing that than I am. The simplicity of it is, yeah, there were lots of days where I felt like today could be the day. Now, fast forward to today, and certainly not trying to make light of that situation because millions of people are in this situation, but there was this park in West Vancouver overlooking the ocean where a lot of people go and get their wedding photos, like engagement photos, wedding photos taken, but like you can legit sit on a cliff unguarded and look down at the blackness of the Pacific Ocean. And there were many days, I won't lie, I was going to school and I would drive over there and I would just sit on that ledge and I would just cry. I'd cry to myself because I could see in my mind's eye today being the day. And now, somewhat humorously, I look back and think, boy, I must have ruined so many wedding photos. Like, before photo bombing was a thing, there's got to be people in Vancouver that are looking at their wedding photos today being like, is that somebody crying in the corner? What is this guy doing? I can say that though, because I've overcome, and I'll talk about it in a minute, because I believe while that was probably the darkest time of my life, strength has come from it. And I'll share about that in a minute. But those were, there's something I've learned. It's called derealization. Derealization is this surreal nightmare feeling that this isn't real. So my eyes and my ears would be saying, I'm on this podcast. I'm looking at my computer and I'm looking at you and we're talking, but everything else about me says this is not real. This isn't happening. This is fake. It's like an awake dream state. But when you're that depressed, it's like a nightmare. I can remember waking up in the middle of the night and the first thought in my mind would be, do I feel that way? Do I feel that way? Do I feel that? Yeah, I do. I do feel that way. This is probably why, a lot of people sleep, why they're always fatigued, because it is a mental battle that is raging constantly. There was a piece of me through that experience, which I've learned now is somewhat unique, that the doctors had told me, which is I felt like, wait a minute, is life really this bad? Or am I missing something? This almost crossroads, if you will. Like, no, really? Is this for real? Maybe is this just what getting old feels like, and everybody that's old feels like crap all the time? Or is something missing? Well, I'm not ashamed of it. In fact, I advocate it. I went and got help. I went and talked to somebody. And for the first while, talking to a psychiatrist, I felt like it was nothing. I remember going home to my then fiance, who's now my wife, I'd be like, what a waste of flipping time. This guy just asked me stupid questions. I was so angry. What I realize now is it was just a space for me to get it all out. He was just letting me dump everything out into an open pit. And then he was then going to teach me how to seal that pit. So I got help. I was medicated. I did all of the things. What really helped me snap out of it, though, the reason I believe it has become a strength for me all these years later is going back to some of the principles that were taught all those years earlier on cassette tapes about the power of gratitude, about the power of positive thinking, about whatever the mind of man can conceive and bring itself to believe it can achieve. All these types of things are flowing through my mind as I'm seeking to get healthy and overcome. And so I decide, okay, well, I'm going to just start a gratitude practice. Every morning, I'm going to wake up before I get out of bed. I'm going to stare at the ceiling and I'm going to list off as many things as I can think of that I'm grateful for. I did that for the better part of 6 months and I felt absolutely no difference. I was almost ready to give up. I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. Then one morning it dawned on me. I was laying in bed and that morning I realized, wait a minute. It's one thing to say what I'm grateful for. It's another thing to express the reason why I'm grateful for that thing. That's a harder thing to do. That is a much harder thing to do. I realized how superficial gratitude has become. Hey man, appreciate you. Why? You know, like anybody could say, hey, Jeremy, I really appreciate you inviting me on the podcast. Why? You've given me space to share my story. And you've reminded me of things from my past that have empowered me over the years. I'm grateful for the opportunity to perhaps help and lift somebody else. Maybe only one person takes something from this, but I'm grateful for that opportunity. In other words, express why. So I remember laying in bed this morning and I'm like, all of the things I'd been saying I was grateful for, I could no longer come up with a reason why. And then just out of my mouth came, I'm so grateful for this warm bed because I've lived somewhere else in the world where they don't have this luxury. And in that moment, I'm not going to say I started bawling my eyes out, but you know, when you're laying down and your eyes just well up with water, enough that tears stream. That's what happened this morning. I felt something different. It was like I just tapped into the Matrix and knew Kung Fu all of a sudden. And I remember that whole day looking around. I'm sure I looked like probably just the biggest tool to my wife that day, but I'd look around and I'd just be like, whoa, you know, I saw the world through a new lens. I remember it was golden hour. For the photographers listening, they know what that means, but that time of day when the sun is setting and it casts a golden glow over. And I remember looking out my office window, looking at this maple tree. And the leaves are billowing in the breeze. Each leaf is independent of itself, but they're all golden and glistening. And I remember looking out the window saying, I am so grateful for that tree because it's beautiful and it's stimulating a feeling in me. And I love it. And from that day forward, gratitude has been a regular part of my life as a practice because gratitude quite simply shifts the lens with which we see the world. It's like needing prescription glasses and finally getting them, you know? And all these years later, what I'm grateful for that experience of going through that adversity and overcoming it because it's heightened my awareness of others who might be experiencing the same thing. It's heightened my desire to help lift others, which is an undertone to my entire business, to my spirituality, to my family. It has elevated my desire to be a helper and a lifter, not a destroyer. There are enough of those out there in the world. People that will make you feel like you can't do it, that it's too hard, that it's not worth it. Oh, you know, I call them the dream stealers. Hey, mom, I want to start a podcast. Oh, there's a lot of podcasts out there. How are you going to be different? Get out of here. Shut up. Right. Like there's a lot of that. And I want people to know that because I know we're great. We were born destined for greatness, to do hard things, to go through adversity and overcome, to struggle in your business and get creative and figure it out, to struggle at home and figure it out and become strong from it, to struggle in your spirituality and come out of it strong. We were destined to do great things. And I'll never forget, just as a last thought here, I saw a snippet of Neil deGrasse Tyson. And somebody asked him if he thought aliens or other life existed out in the universe. And his answer I thought was really interesting to tie this point together, which is he said, well, in his beautiful voice that he has, he said, well, everything we've been able to observe in the universe is carbon-based. Everything, our planet, carbon-based. The stars, everything we can observe is a carbon-based entity. He said, including us, the same elements that make up the universe flow through us. So he said, so with that premise, it's not difficult to ascertain that there could very likely be other carbon-based life forms out in the universe. Well, what I took from that is, okay, well, if the universe is carbon-based and the universe flows through me, and what we're able to observe about the universe is that it continually expands, never contracts, then as part of that universe, we must also expand, never contract. We must do what the universe that flows through us does and expand and grow, never contract. We spend way too much of our lives, Jeremy, convincing ourselves that contraction is the right thing to do. Protect, survival. No, we must do as the universe does and expand continually.
Michael, I want to be the first one to thank you. So much more to cover, so little time. I appreciate you and just sharing your journey and your stories. And it's really motivating and inspiring. So I encourage everyone to check out FlexDealer.com, check out their podcast, check out what they're working on, and we'll see everyone next time. Michael, thanks so much.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.